Last on Everdark. Balthazar denies he is Eiros reborn, much to Daemon's disbelief and dismay. But what Daemon does not know is that the Immortals are viewed as villains for their actions in a long-ago war between the bloodlines, which happened while Daemon slept. What else has Daemon missed? Everdark, Episode 29. The Power of Revenge. Julian hid a smile as Daemon modelled the clothes he intended to wear that night. Tailored black slacks that skimmed his long, muscular legs, a black button-down shirt open at the throat, with silver and onyx cufflinks at his surprisingly elegant wrists, dress shoes with a high, polished shine, and filling it all out was his dark, curling hair and sculpted good looks. He was rather breathtaking, and Julian wished they were staying in rather than going out. The smile came from the fact that Daemon was quite insistent that all his clothes be black or white. There could be some crimson highlights, such as an inner lining to a classic suit coat or embroidery on the cuffs and collar, but most colours were verboten. It reminded Julian of his impression of Everdark as a whole, all velvety blacks and ghostly whites with pops of colour. The tailor, whose name was Manx, just Manx, no last name, circled Daemon with a critical eye. Her right hand stroked her chin as her shoes tapped, tapped, tapped on the marble floor. Julian thought he felt a slight unease from the Vampire King about whether or not she would approve of how he filled out the clothes she had brought him. She stopped in front of Daemon. She ran her hands unabashedly down his sides and tugged at the shirt to make it sit just so.
Well, I would like to tailor this further. It is a little too wide for those slim hips of yours. My understanding is that you need clothing to go out this evening in, yes?
Yes, Daemon agreed, almost meekly.
Then I shall allow you to wear this outfit tonight. When you're done with it, however, it should be returned to me for laundering and adjustment.
Manx nodded at the end of her own statement, as if this was bound to be agreeable to Daemon. Of course. More meekness from Daemon that Julian was going to love teasing him about later. Manx was just a human after all. There was no royal blood in her veins, but she was the ruler here.
Good.
Her head snapped towards Julian, who found himself standing up straighter. He slouched, according to her, hiding his good height. Again with a critical eye she approached him. She had brought him several off-the-rack items too. He was wearing a pair of sinfully soft jeans that felt like he could just live in them forever, and a white button-down shirt with a tan vest and matching shoes. She pulled on the vest and smoothed her hands over his shoulders.
You're easier to dress than he is. Not so tall, not so broad.
Just when Julian was starting to get a tad of a complex for not being too much of anything, though compared against Daemon, who was, he was rewarded by Manx with a,
You're just right. But still, everything can use a little tailoring. You two will turn this outfit over to me after the night is through, excluding the jeans. They're perfect.
Julian rubbed his hands over the front of his jeans.
They totally are.
She has gotten you out of the potato sacks you usually wear, Daemon remarked as he looked Julian up and down.
I don't wear potato sacks. Cargo pants and Henleys with utility vests are just practical for adventuring. Being dressed in wolfskins is not exactly a good wardrobe choice for tomb raiding,
Julian protested. He loved his cargo pants and Henleys. He was going to take a suitcase of them with him back here. Not even Daemon's disapproval would dim his adoration of them. Daemon raised an eyebrow. We will see. Come, we need to go to your home and then hunting. Where are the horses? I do not smell or hear any nearby. A frown had come to cross his lips. Julian let out a soft laugh. Sophia chuckled too. She had been sitting on a nearby couch, watching the two of them get measured and dressed. She offered to wait for her turn under Manx's critical eye until they were done, since they had places to go, while she intended to be lazy in her room. Julian was pretty sure that she wasn't really going to be lazy. Maybe she was going to look into the future or something. But he had a feeling that whatever she did would be useful.
We don't have horses, Daemon,
Julian explained, realizing then how a simple trip to his house, sans other vampires trying to kill him, would still be an adventure or even an ordeal. Daemon had to learn everything, and Julian had to somehow explain it in a way that made sense.
I mean, we do, but we only really ride them for fun or sport. We use cars to get around. I'm sure that Balthazar is a car we can use, or maybe we should call an Uber.
Julian spied the cell phones that Balthazar had mentioned sitting in a dish near the front door. Also in the dish were 2 sets of door keys, likely for the house, and a key fob. The key fob was to a Tesla. Julian grinned. He threw 1 pair of the house keys to Damon and a cell phone. The Vampire King caught them easily. He stared at both for long moments, twisting them in his hands. When the phone lit up, he jerked it away from his face with a growl. Julian and Sophia exchanged an amused glance.
You're gonna have so much fun showing him the world, Julian.
Sophia sauntered over to him as she said this. Leaning against his side, she added,
He'll be like a child again. All wonder and awe. It's good for him. Life before had gotten so stale.
Julian put an arm around her slender shoulders, surprised at how close to her he already felt. Though she was far older than him, she was the exact sort of little sister he would have wanted. He was pretty sure of the answer to this question, but he wanted to confirm.
You weren't around when he was, were you?
Oh no, I'm nowhere near that old.
She waved a hand.
But Seer told me all about him. She missed him so much.
Well, he's back now, and we'll find Seer too.
He hoped they would. But the question was, would Seer still be herself? Or would she have been reborn like Iros was? The 2 of them regarded Damon as he tapped the phone, causing the light to go on and off in a fascinated fashion. He actually sniffed it at one point, and his nose wrinkled. Knowing what a badass Damon actually was made this cat-like curiosity even more adorable.
Sophia,
Manx waved for the childlike vampire to join her.
we must get started with your measurements.
Julian squeezed her to him for a moment more before releasing his grip on her. She took a few steps away. She called over her shoulder.
Have fun. I know you will.
She then skipped to Manx. Julian tensed a little, though. Was she saying that because she truly foresaw them having fun that night? Or when she mentioned fun, did she mean danger and adventure, or... He shook himself. He couldn't worry about the future. It would come as it would come. He had enough to worry about in the present, which included getting Damon into a car and not having him get freaked out by the experience of a motor, lights, and moving really fast. Julian went over to the Vampire King and slid an arm around his waist. He was amazed at how easy it was to touch Damon now. There was an almost tactile need in him to touch the Vampire King. He had never been clingy around boyfriends before. He wasn't even sure they were boyfriends. So this need worried him slightly.
I'm worried that I'm comfortable around him. This is insane.
What is insane? Damon lowered the phone.
That we're standing around here when there's a beautiful night out there, ready for us to discover.
Julian half lied. Damon nodded. With one last fascinated glance at the slim phone, he slipped it and the keys into the pocket of his tailored trousers. The 2 of them walked out of the house together. A Tesla, snow white and sleek, was parked on the curving front drive. The car lit up when Julian pressed the unlock button. Damon reared back, much like he had done with the phone. What is that? Damon hissed as he stared at the Tesla like it might bite him.
That is a car. It's transportation instead of a horse. Come on, let me show you how it works.
Julian linked his hand with Damon's and pulled the Vampire King over to the vehicle. He opened the front passenger door and gestured for Damon to get inside. The Vampire King did not move. He stared at the plush leather interior with continuing distrust. His eyes seemed to measure the space inside and found it wanting, despite its quite gracious dimensions and considerable legroom. Damon straightened. No, he said softly.
What?
No, we are not getting into that coffin. I have had enough of small spaces. Damon took 2 steps back. Any inclination that Julian had had to cajole him died with that last line. He hadn't considered that Damon might be traumatized from the years, centuries, millennia trapped in the tomb. So he shut the door and relocked the car.
I'm sorry,
he said.
I didn't even think of that. We can walk. It's only a few miles.
Damon's nostrils were flared. and faint tremors were running through him. Julian reached over and ran his hands up and down Damon's arms until the tremors stopped. The Vampire King did not look at him, rather stared off into the distance, clearly remembering something unpleasant. When Damon spoke, though, it wasn't about the car or being trapped in that magical sarcophagus. It was about Julian. "I shouldn't have left you alone earlier." Julian blinked. His freak-out with the blood and Arceus seemed like ages ago already. He was sure that he would have more moments when being a vampire became more real to him than maybe he would like it to be, but at the moment he felt quite good and calm.
It's okay. I'm fine now, and...
"You do not understand." Damon focused on his face then. "You are the one I have been waiting for, and I was not there when you needed me." Julian considered this. Would it have been better if Damon had been there when he'd woken up? Yes, and no. Arceus understood his freak-out and could say the right things because he'd once been human. Damon had always lived with drinking blood, or so Julian thought. He didn't actually know. But if Damon had had another life, a different life than being a vampire, it was so long ago he likely didn't remember it.
Come on, let's walk,
Julian suggested. Julian put a hand on Damon's lower back as he pulled out his phone with the other hand. He was about to tap in his address to find out the best way to return to Wingate when he realized he knew. He could smell his home. It was the strangest thing. He smelled leather and books and hot electronics and the faintest remnants of his parents' scents. All of those smells wrapped together was home, and he would be able to find it easily. He could almost visualize the route that he had to take, so he slipped the phone back into his pocket and started to lead the way. Balthazar's mansion was on the outskirts of town, giving the vampire lord far more open land than Wingate had, which was situated in the University Park area in the middle of the city. There were few streetlights and fewer people out near here, unlike closer to the center. Julian was grateful for that, because he realized with a start he was getting hungry.
The Everdark podcast is just a small part of what happens at Wraith Rain. We also have manga, book series, free downloads on Amazon, live streams, and of course, the serial stories that update constantly. As a small publisher, if we want to do something new, we can. We don't have to wait for anyone else's say-so but our own, and of course, our listeners and readers. We don't really use social media for updates. Instead, we do things the old-fashioned way on the Wraith Rain website and through our mailing list. The website's front page shows the latest updates and upcoming events, such as live streams. The info is always sent weekly through the mailing list as well. There is often something happening every day, so check the show notes for our links to our front page and our mailing list form.
"You are saying nothing, but you do not agree with me," Damon said as they walked arm in arm down the street.
I think that you can't and shouldn't be the only person I rely on,
Julian finally said.
Arceus was there, and he knew exactly what was going on and how to help me.
"And you think I would not have?" Damon's voice was neutral, but the toss of his head and slightly flared nostrils alerted Julian that he did not feel neutral about this.
Damon, you can't be jealous of Arceus.
Julian tugged the Vampire King closer. "I enjoy Arceus, but perhaps he is too familiar with you," Damon sniffed.
Familiar? You make it sound like I'm the son of a nobleman, and...
Julian stopped.
That is what you're saying, isn't it? Since I'm your fledgling, that I'm like royal or something.
You are royal. You are of my blood. You are the vampire prince. While that had a charming, old-fashioned tone to it on the one hand, Julian bristled at it on the other.
Arceus treats me just fine, I'll have you know. I wouldn't want him all bowing and scraping. He's totally respectful and kind to me. I don't want you saying anything to him about familiarity.
Julian growled slightly.
This has got to do with you being jealous.
You are quite direct with your wishes.
Am I too familiar as well?
That got him a smile and a shake of Damon's head.
Good. Because remember the Emperor's new clothes? This is one of those moments.
Julian reminded him.
Arceus is my friend. He is your confessor. He practically worships the ground you walk on, and that's good, but I don't want him to treat me like that. I'm not you.
Perhaps. I do appreciate Arceus, and I am glad he was there for you. But it should have been me that you relied upon. I will not forgive myself for that. I will be more assiduous in the future." Julian suppressed a smile and a sigh. Those words had him picturing Damon placing him in a tower shaped rather like a bird's cage and closing the door to keep him safe. Julian, of course, would be hammering at those bars in no time. So he said,
"You're the king. You're going to have to do loads of things. You're not always going to be able to be there for me."
"You only think this because of how I treated you when I first turned you." Damon's mouth was flattened and his forehead was bunched. "You think that you cannot trust me being there. By not being there tonight, I just confirmed that."
No. Okay, maybe a little, but no at the same time.
Julian stopped at an intersection. The city was starting to come alive. There was more traffic and more people on the streets. His senses were suddenly on fire. He was smelling cologne and exhaust, body odor and oil. He heard traffic, talking, dogs barking, heartbeats, and the whoosh of blood in veins, and so much more. He curled himself closer to Damon's body as if purely being closer to the vampire king could shield him from his own heightened senses. He studiously tried to ignore everything and everyone else. It soothed him slightly.
"Of course, part of me wants you to always be there,"
Julian confessed as he sheltered in Damon's larger-than-life presence.
"And if you were the one saying that you wouldn't be, I'd be freaking out. I love that you're saying you want to be. I'm trying to be a good partner. I need you to know that I understand there might be times when you can't be there, that I'll figure it out on my own if I have to, and I'm okay with that."
Damon smoothed his hands down the sides of Julian's head and kissed him gently. "Do you not know that you are the most important part of my existence? Julian, you are my treasure. You are what I will fight for, what I will protect with everything I am."
"Oh, that's...
Damon didn't wait for any reply, but just kissed him softly again, tenderly, reverently. Julian blinked rapidly, fighting off unexpected emotions. That part inside of him that had wailed like a lost child when he'd been separated from Damon in the beginning clamped onto those words and hugged them close. It was a part of himself that he wasn't altogether sure he was comfortable with. It reminded him of how he'd been after his parents' deaths. He'd promised himself back then that he wouldn't cling to people, that he would be all right even if stripped of everyone from his life, that he wouldn't depend upon anyone. Except that hadn't really been true. There had been Christian's parents, and of course there had been Christian himself. He would have died without his best friend 1,000,000 times over by now. But did he know Damon enough to trust him with that kind of importance in his life? They started walking again. Neither spoke. Julian watched Damon with a growing fascination. Who was this being walking alongside of him? On the one hand, Julian felt this complete harmony being by Damon. There was this sense that he could and should say whatever was on his mind. He knew that Damon was far older than him and undoubtedly far wiser. But Damon still wanted to hear Julian's thoughts and was open to even agreeing with them. Damon was also a predator. He'd seen that with Celine and Heath in Nightvallen, the quick and easy way that Damon had killed them. The pleasure he'd seemed to take in doing that was disturbing, but it also drew Julian in. Would he ever kill his enemies with such eager abandon? He couldn't quite imagine it, but then he sort of could too. With powers like Damon's, wouldn't life feel a little more like a video game than reality? Or maybe he should be drawing on the roles of superheroes and following the "with great power comes great responsibility" line. He wasn't sure. Other than the strange sensitivity to smells and sounds, he felt normal. Or rather a little peppier than normal. And he realized at that moment he could see just as well in the darkened yards as what was under the golden pools of light created by the street lamps. Still, he didn't feel quite superpowered yet.
"When are my powers going to kick in? And which ones will they be?"
he asked. Damon's eyebrows rose even as his lips twitched. "You are afraid of falling behind Christian?"
"Maybe a little. But he will only have Iros's gift of mind control, right? But I'll have more than one gift because you have all of them?"
Julian guessed. He hoped he had at least one gift. He hoped that there wasn't a chance he could be a dud. Damon chuckled. "You've already started showing signs of having several of the gifts. But you've only fed once, Julian, and you've been a vampire for less than 2 days.
This is where you tell me to be patient, and that I have all the time in the world.
You do. Damon stroked the back of Julian's hand. I am beginning to understand a little of your quickness. You rush forward.
And I try to drag you with me?
Julian grinned. You do. And while endless contemplation is not wise, quick action is not always wise either. So we are starting at level 0 with you and moving from there. Damon made a gesture in front of them.
Level 0, huh?
Yes. And what does level 0 tell you about our surroundings? Damon stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and people streamed around them. There were no angry words said under people's breaths, though he and Damon were blocking their way. No one seemed to notice them at all. Julian realized that Damon had cloaked them at some point, and he hadn't noticed. It was a good thing he had. Those red eyes of the vampire kings would have caused people to stare as they glowed in the dark like fires, but no one even glanced their way. And there were far more people around them than he'd noticed before, too. They were in the middle of town, just a block away from Wingate, following his nose and innate sense of direction, but had been so much in his head that he hadn't noticed where they actually were.
It's more than me just thinking hard. You're shielding me.
Julian realized, blinking as he thought about how, when they'd stopped earlier, he'd been bombarded with smells and sounds, but his senses were dampened down to almost normal now. Yes.
You noticed I was having trouble and you just took care of it.
Of course. I am your master, Julian. It is my duty to take care of you. Damon's answer was forthright and without any drama, as if this was normal and right and ordinary. Julian was having a hard time processing this, though. Christian took care of him in many ways, and he tried to do the same for his best friend. But this kind of caring was unknown to him since his parents' deaths. Again, his eyes stung with tears that he refused to shed. It was ridiculous for him to be on the verge of crying twice in one night when he had not cried in years. His sensitive eyes caught sight of the tower on his house, on Wingate, the place he loved most in all the world, the place his parents had made a home for him and Christian. Seeing home brought more emotions swirling to the surface.
I don't know how to...
Julian turned away from Damon then. He needed to compose himself. You are not used to being cared for, Damon murmured, more to himself than Julian, or so it seemed. You have had to be so strong since
my parents died.
Julian's throat felt thick with emotions. He hadn't really thought of his parents since he'd been turned. Now their loss, and the fact that he was the same as the beings who had killed them met in his head. He shuddered and swallowed hard. Damon stroked his back, up and down, down and up, easing the terrible tension and anger that gripped him. There was bewilderment, too. He leaned over and put his hands on his thighs. He was having a hard time breathing. It is all right, Damon said with quiet authority.
It can't be. How can it be? I'm a vampire. I'm the thing that killed them.
He got out. Damon was silent for long moments. Would you hate yourself for being human if human thieves or thugs had killed your parents?
No, but they were killed because they found out about vampires existing, and...
They could have found out any number of secrets that humans want to keep secret and been killed for those, Damon gently pointed out. But not all humans would be liable for what happened to them, just like not all vampires are. And you, surely, are not, nor are Balthazar or his group. I am actually rather certain that the one that hunts us now, this Caemorn Lorsus of the Order, is responsible. Julian whipped around, shocked to know the villain of his story. Caemorn Lorsus. If he killed Julian's parents, there would be hell to pay.
If he killed them, can we get to him?
In time. Damon stood tall and confident. His expression, though, was not one of eagerness to go after an enemy, but patience. Julian's hands clenched at his sides. All those years of being able to do nothing to prove his parents' deaths were murders and not an accident, burned inside of him, and he seethed at Damon's seeming indifference.
But he's a threat,
Julian cried.
He wants to kill you and me both, plus our friends. He's dangerous.
He's unimaginative. Damon disagreed.
Unimaginative? What? How does that matter? He still wants to hurt us and those we care about.
You've seen what Balthazar can do with his powers. How he wiped the vampires' minds of all memories of you in the Blood Den. Such a thing could have easily been done to your parents with a simple command, that they avoid all things vampire forevermore, Damon pointed out. But Caemorn didn't. So that tells me something about him. He sees everything as such a threat, so he always overreacts. He thinks that this makes him look strong, but it reveals him as weak.
My parents are still dead. He might be unimaginative and weak, but he has power. He killed my parents and no one cared. He didn't pay for it. There was no justice. There must be.
Yes, you are right. Forgive me. Damon cupped his face. But I was not there then. You were only a boy when it happened. You were only human, but not anymore. If you wish to think of your vampire nature in any way in relation to your parents, think of it like this. As a benefit, it will allow you to truly strike back at the person who took them from you. Julian's face burned with emotion and tears leaked out. Anger and agony filled. He realized then that he had not been dealing with these feelings about his parents or anything else since he'd been turned. Too much had been happening, most of it exciting and positive, for him to really think about his life now. But here he was, having a breakdown, and yet Damon wasn't fazed in the least. Maybe he had been wrong to think that Damon wouldn't have known how to handle him in the bathroom that morning.
I'm not alone in this. That's what you're saying? You're going to help? You won't let what happened to my parents just go because Caemorn is a vampire too?
Julian asked, more like demanded to know. Who is this Caemorn to me? Nothing. Who are you to me? Everything. And if you worry that I am acting in a brash manner towards my subjects, Caemorn is exactly the wrong person I want running a religion or having any sort of power, Damon answered.
Yes, exactly.
He could have acted far more prudently in regards to your parents, and I am sure about many other things. He has not. He has proven himself unworthy already, even if he hadn't harmed you and sought to harm me. Julian, this will be handled. You will have all the revenge you want, Damon promised him. His thumbs glided down Julian's cheeks, soothing the heat that flamed in them. Now breathe. Let go of this anger, at least some of it, for now. Reach for your joy in adventure. Julian sucked in the cold fall air and relished the feeling of it in his lungs. He continued doing this for long moments. His anger did recede. His lust for adventure had always been stronger. Damon's soothing presence allowed the tension to bleed out of him too, and it was during this relaxation that he sensed the other vampires near his house. He stiffened again, but this time with alarm. Ah, I see you have noticed our friends. Fear not. They have no idea we are here, Damon told him. Julian's vision picked out two stealthy red-limed figures. One was hiding on the roof of Wingate, while the other loitered in the back garden. But they weren't the only people coming to the house. Damon started to frown as Julian stepped towards Wingate unconsciously. These two people sensed he would recognize anywhere. His hearing even flickered into their conversations.
Just because neither of the boys have answered their cell phones, Liz, doesn't mean there's anything wrong.
Henry Thorne, Christian's father, said with a touch of annoyance. But there was a little anxiety there too, though he didn't want to acknowledge it.
Christian and Julian live online, Henry. They're never away from their phones or computers longer than a few minutes. But I haven't gotten a response from them in 2 days.
Liz Thorne, Christian's mother, answered. He heard the tap of their shoes going up the front walk. The other vampires did too. And these vampires started moving towards Christian's parents. Julian knew, without a doubt, that these vampires intended to make Christian an orphan, just like Caemorn had made him. He was not going to let that happen. Join us next time for episode 30, Teachable Moments.
We do have one social media exception, and that is YouTube. YouTube is the easiest way we have to let people comment on podcast episodes, run polls through the community tab, take questions, and make announcements. If you're on YouTube and you want to get the news, you can subscribe to our channel, even if you prefer to listen to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or other podcast platforms.
The Everdark podcast by X Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thillis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing. Last on Everdark, Damon and Julian head outside for the first time together. Damon finds cars too like coffins, hinting that he was more scarred by his time asleep than Julian realized. Meanwhile, Julian realizes clearly how he is now a vampire, the same type of being who killed his beloved parents. But Damon reminds him that a species isn't responsible for his parents' death. An individual is. And that individual is Kaimorn Losus. Everdark, Episode 30, Teachable Moments. Damon knew that Julian was going to take off after the vampires the moment that Christian's parents arrived. He could have gleaned who the couple were from Julian's mind, but simply the scent of them gave them away. They smelled of Christian's blood. Julian's terror on their behalf told him how beloved they were to his fledgling. Christian's parents, Julian's practically adopted parents, fragile, mortal, human. He could have stopped Julian easily and gone after the vampires that threatened the Thorns himself. Not even a breath would have had to be spared ordering Julian to remain where he was, and Julian would have stayed right there no matter how much he wanted to move. His power over his fledgling was absolute, though he did not want Julian to know that. His fledgling must not fear him, and even if Julian wasn't afraid, the knowledge that Damon could completely control him would cause his strong-willed fledgling to chafe. And in this case, he must make his own decision and his own mistakes, though I will not let the Thorns or Julian be harmed. So he merely followed after Julian, to keep him and the Thorns safe, but also to see what his fledgling would do. Julian had taken 5 long strides and leaped. With that single bound, Julian had left the sidewalk and flown across the street, above the wooden fence and past the rose bushes. Julian had then landed silently in a half-crouch on the closely cropped grass of his backyard. His fledgling had not even noticed this act of superhuman strength and speed, because he was so intent on what was happening in the front of the house. Christian's mother smelled of wisteria and linen, while Christian's father smelled of leather and old paper. Their blood was rich and meaty. He knew that he would be refreshed from their veins, but they were not food. They were friends. Perhaps. From Julian's mind, he came to understand that both of them were professors at the university where Julian's own parents had taught. But the Thorns were not adventurers. They were very much people of the mind. But even the athletic and fearless Harrows would have been no match for even the newest of vampires. So the Thorns had absolutely no chance against these confessors who were trained in the art of war. But it is all relative, for these confessors will be nothing against my fledgling, let alone against me. Julian went for the one who had been in the backyard, but now was gliding around to the front. This vampire, his name was Gerard, Damon found out by skating over his mind, was thickly built, with dark hair and stubble covering the jaw of his olive-skinned face. He moved with the oiled ease of a serpent. Damon sensed the Helm bloodline in Gerard. "Leave at least one of them alive, Julian," Damon instructed. "We will need to question them." He felt an acknowledgement from his fledgling. He wondered if Julian would be able to control himself once the violence started. He did not wonder if Julian could take this 350-year-old vampire. He knew Julian could. Damon stayed back at the end of the side path while Julian ranged forward on the balls of his feet. Gerard did not notice him coming, until Julian was practically on top of him, even though Damon had released the glamour from around them the same moment they'd gotten into the yard. He would ensure that no humans saw them, but Julian had to deal with the vampires on his own. Gerard spun around just as Julian grabbed the back of his neck with one hand. Julian attempted to slam Gerard's head into the wall, but the confessor shot out a hand to brace himself at the last moment, and a cracking hit turned into only a glancing blow. Gerard then went invisible. Julian became bewildered. He still had a hold of the back of Gerard's neck, but he could not see the vampire he held. Julian suddenly curled forward, his mouth opening in an oomph as Gerard elbowed him. "Use your other senses, Julian. You are not relegated to only your eyes," Damon advised. "Close them. Feel. Just feel. You will know everything you need to know. Believe." Julian hesitated, but then closed his eyes. Gerard tried to stagger Julian, but Julian aimed a wicked kick at the back of Gerard's left knee. There was a distinctive snap. Gerard did not scream, even as his leg hung wrong. He clearly did not want to alert the Thorns of his presence. But even wounded, Gerard was a seasoned, skilled fighter. Julian was no slouch. His fledgling was a street fighter, doing what worked from an almost brutal efficiency over making any fancy moves. This likely came from Julian working in bad areas when he and Christian couldn't depend on the authorities to keep them safe. Gerard tried to elbow Julian in the ribs again, but his fledgling twisted out of the way and rabbit-punched Gerard's side instead, all with his eyes closed. Another blow to Gerard's head, another kick to the wounded knee that had Gerard down. Gerard snarled silently and missed, cutting Julian's legs out from underneath him. "You must end this soon, Julian. His partner is going to either go after the Thorns or come down here," Damon let his fledgling know as he crossed his arms and leaned against the side of Julian's home. Gerard must have realized that time was against Julian too, and sent a desperate roundhouse that brushed against Julian's left cheek, but didn't land fully, as Julian snapped his head to the side. A bruise formed, but would disappear once he fed. Julian wrapped one arm around Gerard's neck and caught the vampire in a sleeper hold. His fledgling's lips were skinned back, his fangs were out. A sleeper's hold could easily kill someone. "Listen to his heart," he advised Julian. It was slowing. Gerard's eyelids slid shut. Julian released him. Gerard crumpled onto the ground. Julian, though, did not take even a second to congratulate himself. His head snapped up towards where the other vampire, her name was Celeste, was about to drop down on top of the Thorns. "Jump. Do not think in human terms, Julian. You can reach the roof easily in one leap," Damon instructed. His fledgling flexed his legs and then rocketed upwards, making a parabolic arc to land on the roof by Celeste. Damon floated to the roof to observe. It was then that the Thorns reached the front door.
"We should knock or ring the bell, Liz, not just go in,"
Henry said, a concerned lilt to his voice.
Don't be silly. Julian gave us a set of keys for a reason. Besides, if they're not answering their phones or email, then they will hardly be answering the door.
Liz responded. There was a rustling as she looked for the keys.
Damn, where are they?
Don't you have them on your keyring?
No, I put them in a special spot in my purse.
Damon turned back to Celeste. She had bone-white short hair and a wiry build. Though smaller than Julian, she was quick and agile. She danced away from him on the roof, her expression showing a fox-like cunning. After taking out Gerard, Julian did not appear taxed. Instead, he was showing greater strength as the predator in him was aroused. A brief glance into Celeste's mind told him that she knew Julian was a newly made vampire by some master who claimed to be Damon. But everybody knew that couldn't be true. Damon was a myth. Or even if Damon did exist, he was asleep somewhere far away. He hadn't made this Julian into a fledgling, so she thought she could take Julian easily. She darted in, racing across the roof's tiles on silent feet. Julian dropped down into a crouch, hands loose at his sides, and waited for her. 10 feet from him, she leaped. She wore spikes on her hands that were now extended. Julian dove out of her way. She slashed at him, but missed. He swept the legs out from under her. She stumbled but righted herself and spun back towards him, outrage on her face. Celeste sent a series of kicks at Julian's head. 1, 2, 3. Julian leaped back and avoided each movement. He was a blur. Celeste's anger and bewilderment grew.
Stay still.
She hissed.
Try harder.
Julian hissed right back. And she did. Snap of her arm across the air that should have slapped him backwards. Stomping steps. Wicked kicks. Julian grabbed her right leg and tossed her. She regained her feet lightning quick, her gaze fixed on Julian's.
Who are you?
She asked.
A vampire, just like you.
No, you're not.
You're right.
Julian's eyes glowed red.
I'm the fledgling of the king.
Can't be.
She shook her head.
I am.
She did not see Damon. He wanted to not distract either of them, but there was a touch of belief.
You should not have come here.
Julian told her.
This is my home. Those are my family.
The king is not real.
She shook her head violently, denial in every movement.
He is, and you are on the wrong side of history.
Fear and anger made men dangerous, but they made vampires very dangerous. Julian's expression was murderous, and that cut through her defenses. She knew something was wrong here. Julian shouldn't have been able to take out Gerard. He shouldn't be this strong. And his eyes, they weren't right. She decided to bolt, seeking cover in the crowded high streets. Julian, speed and strength are not your only powers. She is going to flee. Stop her, but not with your body, with your mind. See if you can, Damon suggested. She did a backflip that would have taken her over to the neighboring roof, but Julian reached for her, and she hung suspended in midair. She let out a gasp, and Julian nearly dropped her, but caught her again. Sweat stood out on his fledgling's forehead as Julian used telekinesis, gift of the Ashir bloodline. Pull her back onto the roof, Damon ordered. Shaking and with more sweat pouring down his face, Julian dragged her back inch by painful inch. But it was beautiful to watch. His fledgling was amazing. I'll handle it from here, Damon said. We need to greet your guests.
Hey guys, this is the last episode of Volume 2. Since this story was written serially, not as novels, the endings of the volumes can be a little abrupt. Why do we do this then? It's because we also sell Everdark audiobooks separately. The audiobook volumes have uncut, uninterrupted chapters, including the sexy chapters that we've had to edit. There are no intros, breaks, or ending remarks, just the MP3 chapters, which you can download and put on any device. Each audiobook is 15 chapters and approximately 8 to 10 hours of audio. The link to the audiobooks is posted in the notes.
From below, Liz said brightly,
Oh, I found the keys.
They had no idea what had happened up here. Damon used the Iros gift to send Gerard and Celeste into a sleep that only he could wake them from. He then dumped Celeste unceremoniously down beside Gerard like 2 sacks of garbage. Julian was still shaking and sweating when he turned towards Damon. His fangs were out, and he was rubbing his temples, trying to calm down but not succeeding. Damon embraced him with one arm while he lightly brushed his fingers across Julian's forehead. His fledgling let out a sigh of relief and dropped his hands from his head. His fangs retreated too.
What did you do to me?
Julian asked, but then waved off an explanation as he heard Liz fussing with the front door.
Forget it. We need...
Damon lifted them both off the roof and landed them behind the thorns on the walkway, without Liz or Henry being any the wiser. He then gently patted Julian's ass to urge the young man forward to address them.
Liz! Henry! What are you two doing here?
Julian sounded strained and a little breathless, but he doubted that the Thorns would notice, as they would be too grateful to have found one of their little flock. Both Thorns whipped around to face them in surprise. Henry Thorn had his son's blonde hair, though that had turned an ashen color and thinned slightly, giving him a widow's peak with age. Intense grey eyes regarded Julian and Damon. He did not see Damon's red eyes, though. Neither of them would notice them at all. Liz Thorne's hair was also an ashen blonde, and there was a touch of her son's elfin features in her face. Her dark blue eyes widened.
Oh, Julian, there you are. You're okay.
She flew down the few steps to him and wrapped Julian in a desperate motherly embrace. Julian hugged her back, a little stunned by her worry.
Of course I am. But why were you worried?
Honey, I watch your show. You and Christian promise something big this week, which can only mean one thing,
she said, kissing the side of his head and pulling back to give him a loving but firm look.
Vampires.
Oh!
Julian squeaked and swallowed.
And I know it's foolish, but since your parents' deaths, I've always worried that you and Christian might follow them too far,
she admitted.
And then you weren't answering your phones, and I really got concerned. Blamed Mother's intuition, but I was worried.
You're a believer in vampires, then? Damon asked quietly. He stood a few feet away from them, arms crossed at his wrists behind his back.
Oh, Julian, who's your friend?
He admired the fact that Liz Thorne did not let go of Julian when she finally, truly noticed him. Instead, her hands tightened on his fledgling, a boy she thought of as her son, as much as she did Christian. She sensed that Damon was dangerous, or perhaps she was just naturally suspicious of any men who were interested in one of her boys.
Liz and Henry, this is Damon.
Julian paused awkwardly.
We're dating.
Dating? That sounds so mild for what we are doing. What we are, Damon sent to Julian telepathically.
Well, I can't very well tell her that you're my master. I think she'd be a little more unnerved than she already is.
Julian replied wryly. Why not? They'll have to be told sometime. Unless you believe Christian wants to cut all ties with them, or use mind control on them so they never notice you do not age.
No. God, no.
Julian was horrified and couldn't imagine either future.
But Christian has to be the one that tells them, if he's going to.
Indeed. So, we must keep them in the dark for now, Julian. Henry stepped over to Damon. He was friendlier than his wife, but he wasn't exactly trusting either. He extended a hand, which Damon took in a firm handshake. Henry's hands were soft, the hands of a scholar, but he wasn't weak. Those intense eyes were fixed on him. Henry was trying to figure out things about him from his clothes to his affect. He flicked through Henry's thoughts on him and got,
A little cold for being without a jacket, Damon, eh?
Henry asked out loud.
Oh, Julian, you don't have a coat on either. What are you up to running around like this?
Liz tutted as she embraced Julian to keep him warm.
We were just, coming from the car to the house.
Julian said.
Where's your car?
Henry frowned as he looked along the street.
In the garage.
Julian quickly said.
But you're coming in the front way.
Liz cocked her head to the side. He read from her mind that the garage was out back. His fledgling was terrible at lying, to these people at least, and the pathetic, puppyish looks he was giving Damon almost had the Vampire King laughing. Why do we not go inside? Damon gestured toward the front door where Liz's key still hung out of the keyhole. Julian has told me so much about you. Liz gave out a high laugh that contained a sort of sharpness, though, too.
Well, he hasn't told us about you, Damon. What is your last name?
King, Damon said smoothly. Damon King.
Well, I look forward to hearing all about you, Mr. King,
she said. Damon, please.
All right. And as Julian said, I'm Liz, and you've shaken hands with Henry.
Pleasure. After you, please. Damon tipped his head towards the door. Julian's eyebrows rose and sent telepathically,
You're good at this.
Reading people's minds has its perks, and I have more experience with people than you.
But not humans, right?
Not these modern humans, but people are people. You'll see. The trappings might be different, cars instead of horses, cell phones instead of letters marked with wax seals, but people are people. The four of them moved there as one. Julian, who was the one to use the keys, wiggling it a little in the lock before turning it. The bolt slid home, and Julian turned the knob and pushed it open. He flicked on the light in the warm and inviting foyer. The illumination came from a simple chandelier that hung over a maple-floored space. Julian let the three of them precede him into the house before he hurried ahead of them to turn on more lights. Damon slowly allowed himself to take in the space that was very much Julian's home. Wingate. He savoured the house's name. It suited the home somehow. He followed after everyone down an arched, tall hallway that led to the back of the house. On the walls were framed photographs of Julian's parents in exotic locales. They were always smiling. Their expressions somehow intimated that they were always meant to be together, even in those rare shots where they might not be touching. A young Julian with a gap-toothed grin often stood between them, parents' hands on his shoulders. It was clear that the three of them had been a tight unit, three people who had genuinely loved one another, but perhaps more importantly, had liked one another. Julian took them to a kitchen, though it was far from the fire pits that he had seen in the past with these sleek metal containers, appliances, Julian's mind corrected him, and rich stone counters. He could still recognize this room for what it was, a place where human food was prepared. There was even a fireplace, fitted with a spit along one wall. A wave of regret filled Julian at that moment as he realized there was nothing in this room, other than the thorns, from whom he would never feed from, that was edible. Julian's exertions had burned through his slender reserves. Damon would have to feed him very soon. Julian settled himself at the kitchen island and gestured for the others to do the same.
Would you guys like something to eat or drink?
I wouldn't object to some wine.
Liz said.
Henry and I were just at the bistro you boys told us about. Most divine French onion soup and steak frite. But I find that I always want more wine after eating something so richly delicious.
No problem. Henry?
Julian lifted a wine glass that was a delicately blown crystal cup on top of a thin stem.
I wouldn't mind.
Henry said with a smile. Julian got out 2 glasses and was opening a bottle of red wine when Liz frowned and asked,
Aren't you two having any?
Julian's eyes went immediately to Damon before his mind voice asked,
Are we? Can we?
Of course we can. I would adore some wine. Damon was curious if the fermenting technology had improved since he'd imbibed some of the sour yet refreshing vintages the humans had made in Nightfallen.
I'll get more glasses. You open that bottle so it has a chance to sip the air.
Liz laughed, and she got 2 more of the delicate wine glasses down from a glass-fronted cabinet and set them on the counter. Julian poured out the ruby-red liquid that was made from fermented grapes. Unlike the vintages he had experienced, this one seemed far richer and more fragrant. Julian slid a glass to Damon after the thorns had been served. He took a sip. The complexity of the drink totally absorbed him for a moment.
It's very good, isn't it?
Liz asked him. Quite complex, he said. He took another swallow. Part of him just wanted to drink this wine and do nothing else until he had unlocked all of its secrets. But the thorns had to be put at ease. Julian was awkwardly spinning his glass. He took a sip of wine, but the taste was not blood, and young vampires were often too overwhelmed by their newly heightened senses to partake in other food.
So, how did you and Julian meet, Damon?
Liz asked. Julian choked on his wine. Henry had to pound his back while Liz rubbed his nearest shoulder.
Sorry.
Julian got out.
Wine down the wrong pipe.
I hate it when that happens.
Liz commiserated. Julian and I met over our common interest in vampires, Damon said once Liz and Henry were looking at him again.
Oh?
Liz did not look happy. She took a large swallow of her wine and her fingers clutched that slender stem too tightly.
Are you a professor of some kind?
Henry asked. Damon knew Henry would be investigating him the moment he had a chance, so lying too overtly wasn't a good idea. Julian wouldn't want him to use mind control on them if he didn't need to, so Damon shook his head. He had not established an identity here. He had understood that much from Balthazar, that vampires took on human personas and had written documents and a cover on Earth. Damon did not yet have such things. He wasn't sure if he wished them, or would he reveal the truth to humans once he re-established his rule over vampire kind as he had in the past. I am just a dilettante. I found Julian through his show. Those were the right words. Julian and Christian were actors of some kind. He did not quite understand Julian's explanation about YouTube and content creators. We corresponded and then met.
I see. And are you of the opinion that vampires are real, Damon?
Liz asked. He knew from her thoughts that he would fall farther in her estimation if he said he did believe, because she thought Julian's obsession with vampires was unhealthy. If he believed, he would be driving that obsession in her opinion. But if he lied and told her no, then when the truth came out, which it would, she would never quite trust him again to be truthful with her when it counted. I do, he said simply. Julian coughed again. Henry pounded his back.
On what basis is this belief centered?
Henry asked dryly.
Guys, let's not do this, okay? I believe in vampires too, and
Julian began. It's all right, Julian. Other than yourself, I think I am right in saying that the Thorns have understandable concerns about the type of person who believes in vampires. Damon interrupted.
you don't have to undergo the Spanish Inquisition, though.
Julian muttered, and his gaze flickered between the two Thorns, unhappy with the lying, but more unhappy with their pressing of Damon. They have no reason to trust me. In fact, Julian, they have every reason not to. They sense that I am a predator. They sense that you are quite fond of me. They are right to be concerned, Damon assured him telepathically. I base it on the very simple fact that belief in vampires has existed throughout all recorded history. Every culture has their version of immortal, blood-sucking beings. Damon answered.
But surely you know that werewolves and vampires were used as ways to explain aberrant behavior in humans.
Henry pointed out. Here is the thing about that theory. You can believe that all of humanity was too simple, stupid, or superstitious to understand the world, or you can accept that they were recording exactly what they saw, and it was the truth. They had experiences with beings who were immortal and fed on human blood, Damon answered.
But there are many beliefs that our ancestors had that were nonsense.
Henry argued.
They believed the earth was flat and that the sun revolved around the earth. They believed the disease came from foul air. On and on it goes.
True. Damon nodded his head. But you also agree that there are things that you believe to be true now that will later be proven to be false, correct? Liz swirled her wine in her glass. She looked half amused and half dismayed.
And you think that our belief that vampires aren't real will be one of those things?
Damon took a large sip of wine, and his eyes met Julian's. Yes.
Well, I look forward to being proven wrong then.
Henry lifted his glass.
Speaking of looking forward to something, where is Christian?
Again, Julian looked at him in alarm.
He's...
With the person he's dating, Damon said smoothly. Liz's mouth dropped open for a moment in utter surprise.
Christian is dating someone too? And he hasn't told me about it?
Well, he...
It's new, Damon answered for his floundering fledgling. Liz put one hand on her hip.
Well, I think a dinner party is in order to get to know Damon better. And what is even the name of this man Christian is dating?
Balthazar Ravenscroft.
Julian got out.
Say that name 3 times fast.
Henry lifted an eyebrow. Damon grinned. Just wait until you meet him. Seeing Balthazar, meeting the parents was going to be perfect. Eiros had always been fascinated with new people. He enjoyed talking with them and finding out every single thing they thought.
Good. Then we'll set it up.
Liz took out her phone and went to what she thought of as her calendar. Julian shrugged and tried to say nonchalantly,
Maybe in a month.
This week.
She corrected. Julian blinked.
Wait, what?
She looked up at Julian and said with definitiveness,
Tomorrow or the next day will be best for Henry and I. You and Christian choose which one of those dates will work. No excuses.
Join us next time for episode 31, Mirror, Mirror.
If you're wondering what the difference is between the audiobook chapters and the chapters on the members' private podcast, the answer is nothing. They're exactly the same, only with the audiobooks, you have to wait until the whole volume is done, since we sell them in batches of 15 chapters. With the membership, you don't have to wait. We publish them continuously, just like with this podcast, and members are 15 chapters ahead of the public podcast. We do understand that some people aren't fond of subscriptions. That is why we have the audiobooks too. Check out the shop to buy the audiobooks with uncut chapters, or join wraithrain.com as a member to get everything that has come out so far, plus access to the new episodes as soon as we post them to the members area.
The Everdark podcast by Ex Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thelis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.
Hey guys, it's Wraith. This is Chapter 31, the start of Volume 3 in the audiobook series. I want to remind you that we have audiobooks available because, unfortunately, there will be some heavy edits and chapters to come to the public podcast chapters. And these aren't just for the romantic scenes between our two gay vampire couples, although there are a ton of those, but also now for disturbing fictional content. It's adult content in the sense of what it talks about is adult. The unedited chapters are available in Volume 3 of the audiobook and also the members' private podcast feed on wraithrain.com. In fact, members are already 15 chapters ahead of the public podcast, or even more, depending on when you're listening to this episode. Link to both the membership sign-up and the audiobooks from the shop are in the notes below.
Last on Everdark, Julian and Damon headed to Wingate, only to find more of Kaymorn's confessors waiting to attack. Damon chose to use this as a training experiment for Julian, and watched with satisfaction as his fledgling took down vampires hundreds of years older than him. But while Damon and Julian won that fight, they didn't win the one with Christian's parents. Liz Thorne is intent on having Julian, Damon, Christian, and Balthazar over for dinner, and she won't take no for an answer. Now we turn back to Christian and Balthazar to see what they've been up to. Everdark, Episode 31, Mirror, Mirror.
It was a good speech, Balthazar. I could tell that the other members of the house felt very confident and knew what to do after it.
Christian said, referring to the pep talk Balthazar had given to House Ravenscroft before they'd jumped into a car for another death ride as Christian thought of it. He was only speaking about this because he was trying to keep his mind off of Balthazar's driving. His gaze flickered over to the odometer on the Tesla and gulped. 80. In a 30-mile-per-hour zone? He clutched the seatbelt as Balthazar angrily shifted. I wouldn't have imagined that you like speeches, Balthazar said, tense despite the compliment. There was a faint flash of preening, though, but it was faint. That wasn't a good sign.
What's wrong?
Christian asked through clenched teeth. They had just blown through a yellow light. He was positive that there were going to be flashing lights behind them any moment, or a death. Nothing. What do you mean? Balthazar had taken his eyes off the road.
For God's sake, eyes forward!
Christian yelled. Balthazar chuckled and went back to driving the Tesla at what amounted to supersonic speeds with only one hand negligently on the wheel. You're such a grandma when it comes to driving.
I'm not a grandmother on the road or anywhere else. You're driving like a maniac.
Christian's knuckles were white. Vampire reflexes. Remember? Balthazar took both hands off the wheel. Christian manfully resisted the urge to grab the wheel himself.
Even if your reflexes are extraordinary,
They are.
other people's aren't. And people are unpredictable, too. You could be put in a position where, no matter how adept you are, there won't be any way out.
Christian pointed out and squeezed his eyes shut as someone foolishly opened a door to their car as they barreled past. You didn't mind my driving on the highway the other night? Balthazar said with a frown.
You're driving even more aggressively this evening than before, which is why I think you must be upset about something.
Christian explained. He would not cover his face with his hands and peer between his fingers like a child. Besides, he was too busy clutching onto the seatbelt with all his might.
You've been like this since the oneness, and you should have been thrilled about that. Power and connection and better things for you and the house.
Balthazar's lips flattened, but finally he let out a sigh. I suppose I can tell you about this, but you cannot tell anyone else. Well, Julian will likely know, as Damon will have told him, but no one else. Master fledgling secret. He glanced over at Christian. To stop him from looking away from the road, Christian blurted out,
Okay, fine. I won't tell anyone. Just eyes on the road.
Balthazar went back to negligently driving, and Christian swore that he would be the one in charge of the wheel from here on out in their relationship. All right. Calm, my child. I have things under control. Balthazar pursed his lips and said, Damon told me that I'm Iros reborn. At first, that made no sense. Reborn? Reincarnation? That was a real thing. Christian had to order his mind around this new information. Finally, he said,
Does he actually know this? I mean, what evidence is there for that? Or is he just comparing you in personality to Iros?
He's not comparing. I am Iros. He's sure, and I can feel things, which means that he's right. Balthazar's lips writhed back from his teeth as he muttered, Of course I would be Iros. If I had to be any of the immortals reborn, it would be him. Christian guessed that this was why they'd had all that discussion about Iros earlier. He tried to absorb this fact, which meant he needed data.
All right, so you're Iros reborn. What does that actually mean?
Mean? Balthazar's brows drew together in confusion. Christian wasn't surprised that so far all Balthazar had thought about were the downsides. He had a feeling that Balthazar was always a glass-half-empty type of individual.
I mean, what's changed about you since he said that? And are there any changes you can expect in the future because of it?
I don't know. I didn't ask. Balthazar's forehead bunched further.
Maybe you should ask.
Christian suggested.
I understand that you're worried about his, or your, I guess, old reputation rubbing off on your current one, but there may be benefits you get from this.
Other than being hated, perhaps?
You've lived as an exile for a while now, so being liked and accepted can't be at the core of your desires. That aspect of being Iros can't bother you. You didn't hesitate to kill Roan, even though you knew that you would likely die yourself, or never be accepted in vampire society ever again.
Christian pointed out. Actually, I did hesitate. An awful lot. And I rather hate myself for that. Balthazar gave the road a thin smile.
Well, because you didn't do something that was both incredibly brave, but also might lead to something even more terrible for you?
Christian shook his head.
I'm glad you thought about it. I'm glad you weighed it all out. I'm proud, though, that after all that weighing, you still did what you did and accepted the consequences. It was the right thing to do. It was a heroic thing.
There was a long silence from Balthazar. Christian chanced looking over at him. Balthazar appeared thoughtful. Some of the tension had drained out of him. Thank you, Christian. I appreciate that, Balthazar said quietly.
You're welcome.
There was a warm, comfortable silence.
But back to the fact of you being Iros reborn. I know you don't want to tell anyone.
I absolutely don't. Balthazar swiped one hand through the air, but thankfully still kept one hand on the wheel.
Well, being someone reborn is not being the person. You have your own reputation. There's no reason for anyone to know, unless, like we talked about, there are going to be changes to you that others will figure out.
Christian said. Balthazar nodded. I will discuss what this means with Damon later. I promise. Maybe nothing will change. Maybe. Balthazar then brought them to a tire-screeching halt, outside of what looked like a 3-story brownstone apartment. The area was very residential. Christian saw few lights on in any of the other brownstones that lined the quiet, tree-shaded street. He saw no evidence of people walking to and from the brownstone as he imagined they would. The street felt asleep. He frowned as he asked,
I thought we were going to the House Margulies' Blood Den to review some of their candidates for acolytes.
We are, Balthazar answered as they parked.
But this is a residential area.
Christian pointed out as they left the car and stepped onto the leafy sidewalk. So? Balthazar cocked an eyebrow up.
But a blood den is like a bar, right?
Christian carefully chose his words. From what he had seen of the Siren Blood Den, that's what it had looked like to him. One of those swank new cocktail bars that specialized in hip cocktails with liqueurs he'd never heard of. Except, of course, blood dens provided blood, and likely more blood. Do you recall that the Siren Blood Den also looked like an abandoned building on the outside? Balthazar asked, as he gestured for Christian to follow him up the half-flight of stone steps framed by an elaborate black iron railing.
Oh, yeah. So this is a cover?
He pointed to the brownstone's facade. It is indeed. Balthazar grinned and knocked 3 times on the front door. A symbol shaped rather like a shard of glass suddenly glowed like a neon sign on the door's surface, and the door opened of its own accord. The silent night was broken by the sounds of raucous laughter and talking. Christian found himself curling inwards as the sound hit his sensitive ears. Balthazar squeezed his shoulders, and the sounds dimmed. Sorry about that. I forgot that you need help shielding. There are so many things I need to teach you, and it's hard to know which one should take first priority. There's also the fact that you hide any inadequacies you have behind this hyper-competence, Balthazar mused, which makes me forget how new you are to all of this. Christian straightened.
I am hyper-competent, and I expect to master whatever you have to teach me quickly so I will not be dependent or a burden.
Balthazar reached to caress his face, but stopped at the last moment, and Christian regretted he had. You could never be a burden, but there's a lot to learn. Now, come, let us start a lesson about the mirror bloodline.
I want to prepare you for what's to come, so here are the upcoming chapters that have cuts. This one has a small cut. Small edits in chapter 33, and then the cuts to 34 and 35 are so big that I recorded a summary of events that take place there. Otherwise, the chapters just wouldn't make sense. There are small edits to 36 and 37. The editor usually posts numbers of cut paragraphs or sentences in the notes so you can check them out for what we've had to edit.
Christian followed Balthazar into the hubbub. The interior of the brownstone was what he would have expected. There was a staircase to their left that led to the upper floors. A wide, gracious hallway headed deeper into the brownstone, and small, cozy rooms with bow windows were off to the right. People were everywhere. It seemed like every square inch of space was filled with people talking, laughing, dancing, kissing. The silver eyes of the vampires were sprinkled throughout like salt in a pepper pot. There were far more humans, though, than he had seen at the Siren Blood Den. The next section of the podcast has been edited out to keep it suitable for a general audience. Christian was about to quickly look away when the vampire's silver eyes met his, and then the vampire's face changed. Christian gasped as he was looking at himself. He grabbed Balthazar's arm.
Balthazar? He's me.
Balthazar covered Christian's hand with his own. No, that's the mirror's gift, the ability to look like anyone. Look around. See, there's another you and another me. Oh, and there are triplets that look suspiciously like Tom Cruise. As Christian gazed around the room, he saw exactly what Balthazar was talking about. The faces of the vampires in the room shifted. Like liquid wax, they changed from woman to woman again, and sometimes in between. They reflected his face and each other's. It was both fascinating and revolting. He found himself drawing close to Balthazar.
How do you know what any of them really look like?
Christian asked. You don't. Balthazar shrugged. People think that house mirror vampires choose ugly people to join them. That way they aren't attached to their original looks and won't mind a change.
Beauty is only skin deep.
Christian murmured and shook himself.
Are they actually changing form, or just our perception of them?
Another good question. I can say that I've had sex with a few of them, and they seemed to be what they were advertising. But one can never tell. After all, I could make any of them believe I had wings, he answered. Christian felt a welling of fascination inside of him. The scientist in him couldn't believe that such questions had gone unanswered. Was there no method about the vampires and their gifts? Balthazar read his expression and perhaps his mind. I can see your little mind whirring overtime. You think we are very foolish not to have investigated this?
Yes?
Christian admitted. The gift is the greatest treasure a vampire has. Letting others know how they work and the limits of them, well, it isn't a very good idea. As much as we are all vampires, we're in competition too, Balthazar explained. So while I'm sure the Mirror know how their gifts work, they aren't sharing that information.
But joint research could lead to so much more knowledge.
Christian cried. Balthazar looked at him so fondly, as if he were a sweet innocent. It would. But it's not happening. At least, not yet. Maybe Damon will give us more insight. After all, he's said to have all the powers.
We've seen him perform a lot of them.
Christian pointed out. We have. Balthazar still looked a little stunned about that.
I'll be asking him about all of them. And you should too. We need to learn.
Christian retorted. Yes, I'm sure he has a lot to teach us. Balthazar nodded. And hopefully he won't be too tight-lipped. Bulky! There you are, old man. We've been waiting ages for you. Thought you might not come if the rumors were true. A young man with a flamboyant British accent called down the stairs. Christian stiffened, thinking automatically that the rumors had to be about Damon and Nightfallen. But Balthazar was steady as a rock. His expression betrayed nothing of any concern he might feel. He put a hand on the base of Christian's spine to comfort him. Christian wondered if he was preparing to single-handedly cause this whole blood den to have amnesia too. Charlie, I would never let you down, Balthazar said smoothly. Oh, dear boy, you have, and you will. But I'll always forgive you because you're my favorite Iros ever, Charlie cooed. Charlie's voice was soon followed by his person. He looked to be about 20, with the unblemished skin of an aristocrat. He had a mop of boyish brown curls, which should have been accompanied by big brown eyes, but they were silver instead. He was thin and languid. He wore an elegant tuxedo whose elegance was not marred by the fact that the bow tie was undone, as were 3 of the buttons of his shirt. He was leaning rather heavily on a red-headed girl who was doing her best to keep him upright. He made it to the bottom of the stairs, and he regarded Balthazar and then Christian. His eyes focused startlingly fast on Christian, becoming sharp and intuitive, whereas before they had been bleary.
Was he only playing at being drunk?
Christian wondered.
Can vampires get drunk? If the person who they're drinking from is drugged or drunk, do vampires experience that? So many questions.
But Charlie's vampire eyes were causing Christian to curl against Balthazar again. He'd always held his own in a fight, but he wasn't as strong as Julian by a long shot. He'd taken self-defense courses and various martial arts classes over the years, yet here he knew he was outmatched. There was something about Charlie that completely cowed him. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't really know what Charlie looked like. He could be this laconic young man, or he could be something utterly different. What rumors are you hearing, Charlie? Balthazar smoothed his free hand down the front of his chest and put on one of his cat-like smiles of conquest. In the past, Christian would have been annoyed at such a look, but now he was understanding that this was part of Balthazar's facade. Just like the mirror bloodline vampires put on different faces, Balthazar just picked up invisible masks. This one was the playboy. You dirty dog, Charlie laughed drunkenly, brushing a hand down Balthazar's arm. Pretending your big secret isn't huddling against you like a lamb. You've got a fledgling. Oh, Bulky. He's lovely. What's his name? If there had been any tension in Balthazar, it now would have drained out of him. Balthazar having a fledgling wasn't a secret. But then again, if these vampires knew who Christian was. His name is Christian, Balthazar said without expanding on the introduction. But that didn't stop Charlie from figuring it out. He's the one on that vampire hunting show, isn't he? Charlie told the redhead. You know, there's the brawny adventurer type, looks before he leaps, very pretty too, and then our more slender, cerebral hero here. He pointed at Christian, who pulls his buddy's butt out of the fire. Isn't that right, chappie? The last was directed at him. Balthazar, though, smoothly answered. They finally found the vampires they were looking for. The redhead giggled and put one hand up to her bow-like lips.
Are you still gonna pretend to look for vampires, Christian?
I suppose we'll have to. If we keep looking and allegedly find nothing, well, all the better.
Oh, oh, I so want to be a guest star. I could be one of those people who claim to have seen a vampire. Charlie was giggling like mad.
Oh, me too.
The redhead clapped her hands with enthusiasm. Balthazar gave them tight smiles. We'll negotiate something for your brief forays into stardom. Don't let him fool you. Charlie winked. I used to be on the stage.
I imagine your gift must make you a natural actor.
Christian said. They all went still. The laughter and talking stopped. Was he not to have mentioned their gift? He went on quickly.
I only meant that taking on another's face or body is nothing, if you can't get the personality down with it.
Charlie beamed as bright as the sun, and the redhead nodded like a bobblehead doll. You understand. Charlie came over and took Christian's arm. Christian did not flinch away, but tried to appear unconcerned. So many of the other bloodlines believe it's just a magic trick, you know. Look like someone else. What good is that?
Well, they must have a lack of imagination if they think that. Your gift is amazing,
Christian said honestly. Charlie squeezed his arm and looked past him to Balthazar, who was watching on with a small smile. But Christian could sense that he was watching very carefully. If Charlie or the redhead or anyone did anything to Christian, he would act. Christian felt incredibly treasured, but also unnerved at how close to the surface Balthazar's predatory side seemed. He wondered if anybody else noticed. He hardly had that thought before Charlie released his arm and gently pushed him towards Balthazar with an airy, "Your fangs are showing bulky. You're in that tiresome stage where everything is a threat to the newborn." "You've got me there, Charlie." Balthazar laughed, but there was a slight dark undertone to it. Balthazar put a protective arm around Christian's shoulders, which Christian found himself grateful for, which was a little unnerving in itself. Needing protection from Balthazar, a good thing. Yet he wasn't a fool. He knew that in this blood den, even though he was a vampire, he was an other, because he was an Iros and an exile. Charlie gave a little delighted shiver as he regarded the two of them. "Darcy," he said to the redhead, "we must play these two for Halloween. We could charge people just to watch us snuggle." Darcy nodded and grinned. Christian was grateful that her face didn't morph into his at that moment. "I hate to move things along, Charlie, but Christian and I have some other business to attend to this evening," Balthazar said smoothly. Of course. Come, this way. Our candidates are upstairs." Charlie gestured back towards the stairs. Instead of staggering up them as he had staggered down, Charlie lightly leaped up them 3 at a time as lightly as a deer. No longer was he drunk, if he ever had been. Darcy, who had on platform heels, struggled as best she could back up the stairs. Christian saw Balthazar's jaw twitch at their slow progress behind her. But Christian already knew that Balthazar was too much of a gentleman to go around her. Finally, they reached the top of the first set of stairs, and thankfully this was as far as they needed to go. Charlie was leaning against the doorway to a room where there were 2 men and a woman inside, all looking as if they were there for a job interview. But Christian didn't have a chance to truly look at them before Balthazar was standing between him and a beautiful black woman at the end of the hall. She froze and stared at him, then at Charlie. "Fiona," Balthazar hissed, but then he shook his head. "Not Fiona." But still, his head snapped towards Charlie, who was looking quite wide-eyed himself. One of your people wouldn't just happen to be wearing her looks randomly now, would they? No, she was here recently. What was Fiona Darksilver here for, Charlie? Charlie gave a little tittering laugh. "Oh dear. Are the rest of the rumors true then as well?" Join us next time for episode 32. Want to meet the Vampire King?
If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider buying a membership to wraithrain.com or buying the downloadable audiobooks from our shops. Not only will you get the full, unedited chapters, but you'll be supporting the Everdark and the development of more works like this. As a small publisher, we are supported directly and only by you, our readers and listeners. You're the ones who make all this possible, and we are really grateful for your continued interest and support. Thanks so much.
The Everdark podcast by Ex Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thelis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing. Last on Everdark, Christian and Balthazar take another death ride. A leisurely drive, according to Balthazar, through the city to a mirror blood den. Christian finds out what is bothering Balthazar. He's Eiros reborn. But Christian believes that Balthazar is only seeing the downside of being Eiros. But their conversation is cut short by meeting some mirror vampires, one of whom has taken on Fiona Darksilver's shape, which means only one thing. The vampire confessor was just there. Now what did she want? Everdark, Episode 32. Want to meet the Vampire King? Charlie. Balthazar dropped his voice low. What have you been up to? Charlie fluttered, and for a moment Balthazar saw a young slip of a girl instead of the laconic English aristocrat he was playing standing before him. I'm not up to anything. Fiona came to us. Christian curled tight against Balthazar's back. The line of warmth from his fledgling had Balthazar even more on edge in this situation. Nowhere was truly safe now, but he hadn't expected to find the Order here. Is she still in the blood den? Balthazar barked as his fangs slid out long and sharp. He would take her out if she was. Damn Arceus's morals. He needed to keep his people safe. No, she's long gone, Charlie assured him. Darcy wobbled over by Charlie's side.
She was in quite the rush.
I'm sure she didn't. Balthazar's hands fisted. Arceus would find her instead and let her go back to the Spire, back to Caemorn if she wasn't already there, telling the Preceptor everything. So why did she come here in the first place? For the sparkling company? Well, old boy, it's more than, Charlie nervously shifted from foot to foot, and his eyes slid towards the mirror who had Fiona's face. Balthazar glared at her until she fled down the hallway, before turning back to his friend. Explanations are in order, Charlie. He then grasped Charlie's arm and pulled him into the room with the 3 potential acolytes. The humans behaved like birds and were on their feet in seconds. He scanned all 3 of them in quick succession. Those 2, Balthazar pointed to the 2 men, are no good. They're already planning their exposé of vampire life. He moved his attention to the female human. She's fine. As an acolyte, though, she and another of your vampires are in love, so she likely won't be a human for long. The woman pinked. The men turned pale. Charlie's mouth opened and shut rather like a fish. Are you sure? I've never seen you scan anyone so fast. Nor had Balthazar. But the scans were done, faster and better than he'd ever done them before. Maybe it was the adrenaline in his system that was making his gift that much more powerful. Or maybe it was something the oneness had triggered. Damon had said it would give all of them greater powers, but he sensed it might be something more integral and unique to himself, something to do with being Eiros reborn. I'm sure, he answered simply, shoving his own concerns about why this was happening to the back of his mind. So, all that blood we normally have to feed you is not necessary to scan our acolytes? Charlie sounded almost put off. You owe me a lot more than blood for doing that. 1 traitor in the potential mirror acolyte ranks would be bad enough, but 2? Someone is not choosing very well. I've done you a massive favor in this, though I did not have to. Balthazar snapped. Now send the humans out. We need to talk. Charlie jerked his head towards the door. and the three humans were practically running. To the men, as they passed, he said, "Don't go far." They truly turned bloodless then. He turned back to Balthazar. "Refreshments should be brought up in a minute. Should we sit down?" Balthazar let Charlie go and reached for Christian. His fledgling came over to his side. "Sit,"
I think I'd rather stand, if you don't mind.
Christian murmured. His fledgling's silver eyes darted around the space and his nostrils were flared. Christian clearly thought that they had been betrayed, and maybe they had been. But he wasn't sure yet. "All right, but stay close to me." Balthazar wasn't going to sit either. So only Charlie and Darcy perched themselves on the sofa and chair opposite them. Balthazar began to pace as nervous energy filled him. His first instinct was to run back to the relative safety of the house and, God damn him, Damon. But Damon was out himself, and knowledge was power. So they would stay here and feed and find out what they needed to find out. "Since when is House Margulies a friend to the Order?" Balthazar demanded, threading his gift through each word. He wasn't expecting anyone to roll over with this simple use of power, but he wanted to soften them. Darcy went immediately stiff, her eyes practically glazing over from the strength of his mind.
Since she offered our house a senior confessor position.
"Darcy!" Charlie hissed, both shocked and angry. She was a far older vampire than Balthazar was. It should have taken much more effort to get her into this state of compliance, let alone to reveal that kind of information. But it hadn't. It was easy. He felt not the least bit of strain. It was thrilling, but also unnerving. So he kept going. In exchange for what?
They wanted us to duplicate some of your house members.
She answered. And what did she want these doppelgangers to do? His voice was crisp, and the urge to strangle Charlie and Darcy ran strong.
To infiltrate your house?
She answered.
But we told her that it wouldn't work. That you have technology from Everdark that would alert you to our presence. So she decided against the plan.
A vein in Balthazar's right temple was throbbing. Fiona had intended to come into his home, disguised as his people, and thought he was so stupid he wouldn't have noticed a mirror trick, even without the Everdark tech that he had stolen and secreted from House Tithe. He would have known the doppelgangers were not the real thing, just as he had known the woman in the hallway wasn't Fiona, because they would not smell right. Did Fiona think, because he wasn't allowed into the precious Everdark, that he had somehow lost the most basic of vampire abilities such as smell? It was the insult, more than even the betrayal, that angered him. Did House Margulies object to violating House Ravenscroft's sovereignty? His tone was arctic.
No.
She answered simply, and that hurt more than anything else. He wasn't foolish enough to think Charlie truly was his friend, but he had thought there was enough respect between them that House Margulies wouldn't agree to participate in the murder of his people. Even if their role was simply to spy, what they learned there would be turned over to Fiona, to the Order, neither of which had any good feelings towards him. "And did you know why she wanted you to go inside House Ravenscroft?" he asked. It was at that moment that Charlie jumped to his feet and stood between him and Darcy. "You need to stop this, Balki. You're violating our friendship by using your gift. And what do you think you did by offering the services of your house to violate the sanctity of mine?" Balthazar hissed. Now it was Charlie's turn to pale a little. "Point taken, but still, Balki, we had no choice. It wasn't personal. Believe me when I tell you that I would never have done it without the Order being involved." He grabbed Charlie by the shirt front and shook him. Even though they were in a house full of mirrors, he was not afraid. He could feel the gift in him growing. It wanted to break free, to explode and take out the minds of any mirror bloodline in this damned place. And at this moment, there was a memory of doing exactly that. He was on a battlefield, striding over grey stone and torn bodies. The sky above him was like a violent sea. He carried no weapons, wore no armor. His mind was both. The people before him clutched the sides of their heads and screamed. Blood ran from their eyes, noses, and ears. He extended a hand towards the nearest of these warriors. The blood started to flow through the air from their bodies to him. The blood wrapped around his bare arm and brightened before disappearing into his skin, replenishing him without the need to bite into flesh. He watched as the man shriveled into a mummified state and then turned to dust.
Balthazar? Balthazar, are you okay?
Christian was grasping his arm, an arm that was raised up. His hand was around Charlie's throat, and Charlie was dangling off the floor.
Bulky, please, set me down.
Charlie croaked out. Shaking, mouth dry, Balthazar gently put Charlie down and turned away from everyone for a moment. Christian was rubbing his arm and asking in a low voice,
Are you okay? What happened there? Your eyes went all funny and I don't know. You didn't seem like yourself.
I'm fine. I will be. Just give me a moment. Balthazar drew in a breath and slowly let it out. He did that for several moments. It's how he would calm himself after an encounter with Roan. He was anchored in this place. Everything was fine. Christian continued to pet him. He looked down into that beautiful, thoughtful face. Thank you, Christian. Christian tentatively reached up and touched his cheek. Just a bare brush of fingers, and then the hand was gone. Christian stepped back.
It's fine. If you're fine,
he said quietly. I am, or he thought he was. That was a memory. A goddamned memory. He had to deal with this later as well. Balthazar turned back to Charlie and Darcy, who were huddled together on the chair, looking up at him as children might an angry parent.
You look different,
Darcy said, still under his truth-talking thrall, which was amazing since he'd lost control entirely, yet not of her. Look, we need to talk about what's important. Not that losing my mind isn't important, but it isn't that important right now. Mira has never cared about the Order, and you now would be part of infiltrating my house simply to get one of your own upgraded.
Caemorn is making things difficult for all the bloodlines,
Darcy answered, which had Charlie both wincing and nodding.
If you aren't in the Order or don't have people there in high levels, things will go badly for you.
So how are things so difficult for you that you'd betray me? Balthazar snarled, wanting to grab Charlie and shake him again. Charlie's hands pressed together and he gave a soft laugh. Losing access to the Everdark. Acolytes being taken. What? Balthazar couldn't help the exclamation. Never had the Order been so bold as to take acolytes. The Order obtained their own just like everyone else. At least, that had been the case before. Why do you think we're scraping the bottom of the barrel with those three? Well, not Claire, but Tom and Max, Charlie asked with a helpless shrug. All our best candidates are being sent to the Spire as tribute to the Order. Tribute? Tribute! Anger started to rise in Balthazar at that word. So Caemorn is acting as king now? Christian's eyes darted immediately to him. Caemorn was playing king, just as the true king had returned. It seemed almost prophetic. At all the times for Daemon to have woken, it would be now when someone was actually trying to mount the throne.
You know, writing is hard and lonely. I'm more a storyteller who loves nothing better than interacting with the audience. This is why I write serially, and members have the ability to comment on the chapters as soon as I post them. So no waiting for an entire book to be done before I know what you guys think. In case you didn't know, I run my own serial website for gay action and adventure romance since 2010. And the reason I've done this as my focus, rather than writing traditional books, is because I get to talk to you guys. I have always loved interactive storytelling like Dungeons & Dragons, and this has been my way of interacting with my readers. Now, there are live streams. I've been reading Empire of Stars on stream at least once a month. And since Everdark started, I've been doing live streams with a cast member when they're available. On YouTube, I've made separate playlists for Empire of Stars chapters and Everdark cast streams, and I'll put the links to those in the notes.
True king. Damon is the true king, our king. So I'm accepting that now. He realized he was. And that would have stunned him rather more than he could allow it to at that moment, because Charlie was speaking and he needed to listen.
Not Kamorn. Well, yes, Kamorn, but there's someone behind him. Artemis. People think that he wants to disband the council and recreate the monarchy. Whether it would be Kamorn or Artemis himself on the throne is unclear.
Darcy said. Or that's the rumor, Charlie hastened to add. Just rumors.
Who is Artemis?
Christian asked innocently. Artemis Alucius is Kamorn's master. Some say he's the head of the Callie bloodline, but Callie keep everything about themselves and their bloodline secret. Makes sense, since they play with corpses. Seeing Christian's eyes widen, he explained further, they can control the dead, like necromancers. Christian blinked.
Seriously?
Yes. See? Lots to learn. I told you. Balthazar couldn't help but smile at the dazed but happy look on his fledgling's face. Show Christian something new to learn, and he was all over it. He turned back to Charlie and Darcy. Why are they seeking to rule now? Both shrugged. They didn't know. Then again, why not now? Balthazar knew, though, that Damon was back. Kamorn and Artemis must have suspected all along that the Harrows had found Nightvalin and Damon. Were they trying to establish their own leadership before he appeared and reclaimed the throne himself? They were too late. Damon's existence wouldn't stay a secret long. Damon had no desire to stay secret, and the Order would need to act openly to stop him, if they could. And the ironic part is that the Order itself set Damon up as the savior. Now they're going to topple him? Crazy, Balthazar thought. In some ways, you're good being on the outs, Balki. You don't have the hassle of dealing with Kamorn day in and day out. Charlie shook his head wearily. Other than trying to get my friends to betray me and sneak into my house for who knows what purpose. But Balthazar knew the purpose. Fiona's spying mission would have been greatly aided by an up-close view of Damon and what he could do. If the Vampire King had not seen her and pointed out her spying, she would have had far more to report to Kamorn. Charlie leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, looking rather exhausted. They're taking everything. Acolytes, the best potential fledglings, and even members of our own houses are being asked, but it's more like demanded, to join or serve the Order, or else. How long has this been going on? And why haven't you said anything to me? Balthazar crossed his arms over his chest. One of Charlie's curls drooped over his forehead. Being friends with you is one thing, but speaking about the Order business is another. You're an exile, Balthazar. Not so much of an exile that you don't come to me for help. He bristled. He couldn't help it. That word was like a slap in the face. Exile. Outsider. Loser. Less than. Christian put a hand on his arm and squeezed, centering him. I'm not saying it's right. If I thought it was right, I wouldn't risk so much being openly friendly with you, Charlie pointed out. And that was actually a fair statement. You're one of the best, if not the best user of the Iros gift. Vampires far older than you can't do a fraction of what you can. It was foolish to exile someone of your strength. You have no idea how foolish, especially if I'm really Iros reborn. Being on the outside is more honest, Charlie. You might not get the bells and whistles of Everdark, but you're free. Hell, that might not even be true any longer. Nightvalin might very well be open to House Ravenscroft, the best and most spectacular city in the Everdark, the city of Pale Stone. He covered Christian's hand with his own. You don't have to give up the best to Kamorn or Artemis. What you have is your own, and no need to give lip service to a pretend king, because we've got a real one that you can actually respect. Charlie's gaze lit up to his face. It was intense. Perhaps we need a king. Perhaps if people had an alternative, if there was another, a true king, then things would change. People would stand up to the Order. Stand up to Caemorn. What are you asking me, Charlie? I heard the whispers about how the Harrows found something huge, and that they were killed to keep them silent as the grave, Charlie said. His silver eyes searched Balthazar's. Christian made a small, wounded sound that he immediately bit back. Balthazar touched his shoulder. He wanted to embrace him, but Christian was stiff and mostly unreachable at that moment. His silver eyes were haunted. How close had he been to the elder Harrows? He knew that Christian's parents treated Julian like he was their other son. I heard that a siren blood den was infiltrated last night by a vampire with an infinity symbol. Charlie continued and licked his lips. And I know that every person in that blood den was given their second death. A chill ran through Balthazar. They had all been killed. All those vampires. The Order had done that, even though he had mind-wiped all of them. There was no chance of them remembering Julian. But the Order had killed them all. Just like they had killed the Harrows. Unnecessary. Too much like Roan and the overkill that those in the war had always resorted to. Or rather, those who were too damaged by the war to think otherwise. Charlie pointed to Christian. Not to mention, you have him, Julian Harrow's best friend, as your fledgling. Christian and Julian don't go anywhere without each other. Christian turned to him.
Does every vampire watch our show and spy on us?
We love your show. And since you're local celebrities, well, vampires are all about themselves, don't you know? Charlie explained. And you and Julian are all about us, so there's a natural affinity. Christian shook his head as if he couldn't quite believe he had been observed for so long without him or Julian knowing it. If Christian truly realized just how followed they had been, he would be far more unnerved.
And of course, we know that Fiona wants access to your house.
Darcy added to the list of evidence. What does this all point to? Balthazar asked, not willing to be the one to say it first. Charlie licked lips that looked as pink and innocent as a child's. Did the Harrows find Nightfallen? Did they find him? Balthazar studied Charlie and Darcy's faces. Hers more openly showed emotions as he had her under thrall despite not trying to. Charlie's was more shuttered, but in both of them he saw hope. How had he missed the hunger in all of these people for Damon? He would have thought they would be eager to be free, but they weren't. They wanted a king. And Damon will not disappoint. There was no real point in lying. They already knew. They just wanted to have confirmation. Secrecy had been one thing when he'd hoped the Order hadn't known about Damon and Julian, but the Order did know, and they were going to move. His supposition that the vampires would be against Damon was clearly off. Maybe there were far more who would flock to Damon than reject him. They could have allies. They might even have zealots to counter the Order's zealots. So he decided to tell them the truth. Damon wouldn't mind. He would love it. He found himself saying, King Damon is real. He's here. Both blinked. One of them took a sharp breath.
Here?
Darcy looked around like Damon was hiding under a cushion. Staying at House Ravenscroft. But actually, out on the town tonight, he answered. How do you know he's really... Charlie made a motion with his hand. It was Christian who answered.
Balthazar didn't believe Damon was really king either, even when he came from Nightfallen to Earth through a portal in the wall. He came to us in the form of hundreds of wolves.
Warin's gift,
Darcy murmured. He's demonstrated his mastery of almost all the gifts. We haven't had him raise the dead or anything, Balthazar said with a shrug. Damon wasn't a show pony. But, and he was surprised, how he almost got choked up as he said, he's like nothing you would expect and everything you'd think a king would be. I'm not really one to follow anybody, but he's our king, Charlie whispered. Yes, Balthazar said, still not quite believing he was saying it, but he was. Our king.
Can we meet him?
Darcy jumped up, her hands clasped in front of her. At first, Balthazar was going to say, no, Not tonight, but in time. Yet they didn't have time. The order would be on them at any moment. They needed allies now. Better to get the ball rolling. Besides, Damon would want to meet his people, wouldn't he? Yes, he would. So Balthazar pulled out his cell phone and said to them, "Let me see what I can do." Both Charlie and Darcy looked slightly dazed. They hadn't expected him to say yes. They couldn't believe that Damon was real, he thought. Seeing him, touching him, maybe trying to take on his looks, that would make him real to them for sure. Christian looked up at him with a quirked smile.
I'd call Julian's line, as Damon probably won't know how to use the cell phone.
Good point. Balthazar resisted the urge to kiss him. Christian's repressive look, but pink-cheeked, told him that his fledgling was well aware of his desires. He dialed Julian's number and the young man picked up practically on the first ring. "Julian, I was hoping to speak to Damon."
Balthazar, how very awesome that you called, right now.
Julian's voice was higher than usual and sounded a little strained. "Are you in danger?" Balthazar immediately asked, and Christian came alert with worry.
No, not the kind you're thinking,
Julian assured him, and let out a breathy laugh.
Tell Christian that his parents are asking to meet you and him and me and Damon for dinner.
Tomorrow or the day after that. Tomorrow will be best.
A woman's bright voice called out in the background. Balthazar stood there quite flummoxed for a good 30 seconds before he shook himself and said, "Are you saying that Christian's parents want to have dinner with me?"
With all of us,
Julian corrected. Balthazar blinked. He was going to meet Christian's parents. They were going to evaluate him. Was he good enough for their son? And what about the vampire thing? They would need to know eventually, but when? We're in the middle of a showdown with the Order. We can't have dinner with Christian's parents, the logical part of his mind shouted.
Tell him there are no excuses.
The female voice, undoubtedly Christian's mother, called over the line.
Yeah, I'm telling him right now.
Julian assured her.
So, Balthazar, that's happening. Dinner is happening.
She doesn't take no for an answer? Balthazar turned to grin at Christian.
She does not,
Julian agreed. Christian's ears had picked up on this conversation, and he was pinching the top of his nose and shaking his head slightly. And in spite of the danger they were in and all the crazy changes going on with himself, Balthazar found that he was absurdly happy all of a sudden. "Please tell Mrs. Thorne that Christian and I would be thrilled to have dinner with her and her husband at their convenience," he said, grinning so wide that his face hurt.
Great, I'll tell her.
Julian's voice was too high for normal, but there was relief there too.
Now, you were calling about Damon?
Balthazar's gaze slid to Charlie and Darcy, who was still agog. "Yes, there are some people who would like to meet Damon and you. Do you know the bar Absinthe?"
On 2nd Street, yeah.
Julian said, sounding even more relieved as this would give him the excuse to escape the Thorns. "Meet us there in half an hour."
No problem.
Balthazar ended the call and said to the mirror vampires, "Are you ready to meet the one true king?" Join us next time for episode 33, Leaving Home.
Do you want to join the next live stream? The easiest way is to subscribe to the Wraith Rain YouTube channel. You'll see the community posts, shorts, announcement videos, and get notifications when we go live. You can also join my good old-fashioned mailing list, and you'll get an email reminder within 24 hours with links to our YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook channels. Hope to see you on the next one.
The Everdark podcast by X Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thelis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.